Hello and welcome to Cosmic Goblins, a fiction podcast specializing in cosmic horror, dark fantasy, and all things weird fiction. I'm your host, Alex Wolfgang. If you've ever listened to an episode of our show and thought, I like how weird this is, but my God, don't they ever lighten up? Today's episode is for you. Jason Plouffe's Fool's Gold is a hilarious, maximalistic, phantasmagorical ride through the fogways, his take on a fantasy multiverse. It was first published in Goblins and Galaxies 1 back in autumn of last year, and it's one I've been looking forward to adapting for a while. Stay tuned afterward, as I'll be following the story with a chat with Jason himself. Enjoy! Cosmic Goblins presents Fool's Gold by Jason Plouffe. Fogs. I thought Benny's litter box was rank, but nothing compares to the reek of a Goblin Market dive bar, and the Dead Dog Inn has dove deeper than most. I take a long pull of Valkyrie's fire to stave off the bouquet of sour wine, fried circuits, unwashed drunkards, and, oh yes, an open-access urinal trough. Golden fireflies dance upon my tongue. Perhaps Maureen, the obsolete sex bot behind the bar, wasn't lying when she assured me the liquor was produced on the slopes of Valhalla. It certainly cost enough. I quaff more liquid glory and glance around the crowded bar again. No witches are visible under the flickering electric strip lights, nor are any felines in attendance, despite the legion of rats patrolling the floor. My fingers itch in proximity to the pockets and pouches of so many drunks. I pat the sack resting on my lap as the rush of Valkyrie's fire subsides, and watch Maureen rattling behind the bar. She is showing a lot of synthetic skin, worn and patchy as it is. Algae glows upon her exaggerated chest. My eyes are up here, honey. Her voice sounds like a badly tuned radio, the volume cranked to rise above the chorus of curses, laughter, retching, and squeals. Sorry. I meet the rundown robot's camera eyes. Her left lens is fractured and spits occasional electric sparks. The right is sharp and focused. A handy security feature in a place like this, no doubt. What's with the gloves? I fold my leather-clad hands atop each other. Best to be protected when servicing frigid witches. Maureen laughs, then regards me seriously. Do I know you? Doubt that, seeing as I've never been here before. I catch myself reaching to flip my cashmere hood up, scratch my chest instead. I'm looking for Madam Hex. Maureen blinks cracked eyelids, spits lube into a glass, and starts polishing it with a dead rat. Of course, this dump is cash only, and my sleight of hand isn't what it used to be. I sigh, fish another precious coin from my hoodie pocket, and place it on the bar top. Maureen swallows the coin without hesitation. Conference room 2. She winks, pointing a peeling chin. Just my luck. She's indicated a door next to a table where a purple Goliath with a face like rotting Swiss cheese drinks alone. Mind the purple peril, she adds. He's about as stable as a stick 100-year-old hobgoblin dynamite these days. I'll be sure not to jar him. I partially unzip my hoodie, sling my sack over my shoulder, lift my glass, and wade across the common room. Maureen's camera gaze tingles between my shoulders as things crunch and squirm underfoot. Speaking of vermin, the place is packed to the tits with the veritable scum of the known realities. The Goblin Market has always attracted unsavory characters, but tonight, it's as if a cosmic toilet brush has reached into the furthest flung cesspits of the fogways, reaped a deadly debauched harvest, and deposited it here, at the Dead Dog Inn. There are degenerate pixies, lecherous dwarves, clockwork cutthroats, second-rate cyborgs, sorcerers in stained robes, mercenaries in spiked leather underwear selling death or pleasure, and, of course, myriad goblins underfoot. A mixed party of rusted meta knights and hulking barbarians toss laser darts at a trussed-up squealing moonpig. Behind them, an orc in a business suit pitches battle insurance to a gigantic fighting cock with a bandaged head. Distracted by so many potential cut purses and marks, and keeping a wary eye on the purple peril as he broods over his massive tankard, I nearly trip over an obstacle on the floor. A third of my drink spills. Fogs, damn it! A possum-headed goblin is literally underfoot, cuddled up to somebody's pet deathworm. Reminded of my earlier encounter with his brethren, it's all I can do to restrain a kick to the snoring bastard's side. How did I end up back in this putrid nest? It wasn't my fault. I can assure you that. It had all escalated with a hiss, menacing me before the coffee had even finished brewing. "Sorry your breakfast is late, Your Majesty," I answered from the sofa. "But fat cats don't win best in show." Benny's a Bengal cat, a suave killing machine with a spotted coat and the entitlement of a diva. He hissed at me again. I looked up to scold him and received a nasty surprise. The beast hissing at me this morning stood on two legs, its wiry frame bristling with threat. I blinked, but the irksome vision remained. A diminutive biped with a badger's head standing in the doorway of the living room closet, wearing my designer galoshes. A sparsely feathered turkey girl jostled it from behind. She was sporting my kid skin rain slicker like a nun's habit, her dandruff-ravaged body flaking all over the supple black leather. The pair tumbled onto the living room carpet. A fox-headed homunculus leapfrogged over them, followed by a bait-headed mongrel and an anthropomorphic toad. Goblins. I glanced at the kitchen window. Thick fog swirled outside. The window was open, a few tendrils of fog creeping through. I hurled my brand-new folding phone at Badger's head, and leaping from the Italian leather sofa, made for the kitchen, slammed the window shut, and spun to face the invaders. The motley crew occupied the living room, casing my pad with beady eyes. Though the nasty little brutes had wicked daggers strapped to their legs, they'd taken the liberty of raiding my toolbox for improvised weaponry. Miniature fists clutched wrench, power drill, my ancient shoe hammer, and an extension cord whip. Baitehead had even brandished my caiman skin umbrella. "The Irish jig is up," Badger growled. "Give us the gold." I raised my hand, fingers shaping a symbol of power, and voiced an ancient curse. Nothing happened, but old habits die hard. "Give us the gold," Badger repeated, "and Madam Hex will let you keep that pathetic, powerless human body she gave you." Behind him, the turkey girl squawked her derision. "Refuse, and she'll tell Gulatong and everyone else you've ever swindled exactly where in the fogs you're hiding, and what you look like now. And then—" The coffee maker beeped. All 5 goblins jumped like frightened cats. "Oh, calm down." I leaned an elbow on the kitchen counter and lifted the crystal carafe from the burner. "Now, why don't we discuss this over coffee, like civilized monsters?" I tilted the carafe up and down, wafting the comforting aroma toward the invaders. "Or I could make all of you even uglier, and when I'm done," I promised Badger, "I'll use your pelt for a hat." "Fat chance," Badger growled. "But if you manage it, you won't be the only one with a new fur hat." "Yes, I heard your mother finally saved up enough from her whoring to buy a proper outfit," I said. "Give her my regards. But tell her, next time, less teeth." "Fog snoggler," Mr. Toad croaked. "Nobody talks about Blathor the Bloody's mother like—" I interrupted the toad with a splash of scalding coffee to the face. He croaked obscenities, pawing at his eyes with warty, webbed hands. Foxy Loxy and Baitehead lunged for me, screaming bloody gore. "Wait!" Blather the Bloody shouted. "We're supposed to—" Whatever he was about to say was cut off by Foxy Loxy's bark of agony as I caught her full in the face with the remainder of the steaming coffee, dealing Baitehead splatter damage as well. I seized a bottle of maple syrup from the counter and smashed it over Blather the Bloody Badger's head, staggering him. "You'll never get me precious gold, fiends!" The rich aroma of Indonesian fair trade civet beans mingled with the yeasty miasma of unwashed goblin. I hurled the crystal carafe at Baitehead's fishy face. He opened my umbrella, deflecting the carafe and tearing the caiman skin in the process. Shattering crystal complemented my shriek of rage. Hissing like hell's own espresso machines, the goblins pressed their attack. "Come die," I taunted. "Come die." Blathor lobbed a wrench. I ducked, grabbed a hammer, skipped a whip, landed by the stove, and grabbed my heavy cast iron pan by its latex-covered handle. My hand itched as I brandished the pan and cracked Blathor's skull like a soft-boiled egg. Turkey Lurkey gored my arm with the drill. I returned a crunching blow to her face, pivoted on my heel, and smote Batehead with a backhanded swing. I could do this all day. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 goblins on the floor. Were there any more? I bludgeoned the burn victims, then tore a strip from my ruined silk shirt to bind the wound on my arm, scanning the living room as I did so. No fresh foes were apparent under the couch or in any dark corners. I crept down the hallway, checking behind the row of potted plants. No enemies presented themselves. I entered the living room closet and rooted through the midden heap on the floor. Underneath was a gaping, mist-edged hole. I toppled my prefabricated bookshelf, retrieved my shoe hammer from the kitchen floor, and knocked the bookshelf into pieces. I selected 2 planks and quickly nailed them over the hole in the closet. I used more of the planks to board up the windows in the kitchen and hallway. After that, I gathered the goblins' daggers and makeshift weapons, carried them to my bedroom, double-checked that no one was hiding in there, and locked the gear in my trunk. I opened the cupboard to assess my food supplies. An incursive fog can last only so long. I was well stocked for a siege. My eyes fixed on the bag of perfect cat treats sitting beside the stack of canned salmon and escargot. I took the treats and searched the apartment again, shaking the bag as I did so. Benny didn't so much as meow. I eyed the boarded-up kitchen window. Had it been open all night? I ventured down the stairs and opened the door a crack. Dense fog hovered beyond the stoop, thick and impenetrable. "Benny!" I shook the bag of treats. "Are you out here?" Something sniffed the air, loud as a rhinoceros's snores. "Come out, come out!" a crushed gravel voice rumbled. "I'll eat you with catsup, little man!" I heard a great gullet being cleared, followed by a splash against the door. "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty!" a giggler squeaked. "Here, kitty, kitty!" I slammed the door and threw the bolt, a chill running up my spine. I climbed the stairs, went straight to Benny's food bowl, and found it ominously full. I checked his litter box. Not a single turd, and I'd last cleaned it 2 days before. Oddly, there was a scattering of litter on the floor. I slid the box over the floor with my foot. Underneath was another mist-edged hole. Fogs, damn it. I'd kill the witch for this. I nailed a board over the hole, then went to Blathor's body and began picking through his pockets. A much easier task when your marks are dead, I'll tell you. I found a few coins that I added to my own pocket. Mystery flesh. Potentially magic beans. Also, a drink coaster emblazoned with a distinctive logo I'd hoped not to see again. The Dead Dog Inn, 97B, Sly Fay Alley, Goblin Market. The decorative text encircled an illustration of a dead puppy hung from an arched doorway. I moved on to loot Mr. Toad. As I bent over him, something slammed into my back, sending me sprawling. Turkey Lurkey lived. The putrid poultry leaned drunkenly, squawking gobbledygook through a mangled beak. She'd come to, snuck to the stove, wielded the cast iron, and struck a blow that would have brained me if the luck of the Irish hadn't caused me to bend at that exact moment. Her flaking skin inflamed with murderous fury, she raised the pan for a double-handed killing stroke. She was already an omelet. I rolled and rose into an uppercut, striking her beak and slicing my hand on fractured keratin in the process. She dropped the cast iron and toppled onto me. Filthy plumage poked me, while flecks of dry skin rained from her body onto mine. I wrapped my hands around her throat. "Where's my cat?" I growled. Her broken beak slashed a retort at my face. I turned my head to save an eye. My ear erupted liquid fire. I headbutted her twice. "Tell me, you dirty bird." I squeezed her throat tighter. "Where is he?"
"Hex,"
Turkey wheezed.
"Hex has him."
"Where?" I shook her like a pit bull on a kitten.
Dead dog,"
she slurred. I wasn't surprised to learn Madam Hex was still holding parlor there. I threw Turkey Lurkey on the ground, seized the cast iron, smashed her face, and smashed it again. When she'd stopped twitching, I wrapped my bleeding hand in a monk's cloth tea towel. Holding a sea sponge to my ear, I filled the kettle, rinsed the French press, and ground the last of the civet beans. I finished looting the corpses as the coffee brewed, finding a meager few coins and nothing else of value. I opened the fridge, removed a purple velvet sack from the crisper, and emptied it on the table. Finally, I had my coffee and counted my precious gold. Next, I found the whetstone and a pair of leather gloves. I sharpened the pan. An odd choice of weapon, I know, but my gut told me it was lucky. After sharpening it, I fastened a length of bungee cord through the handle. I removed the gloves, rummaged through the utensil drawer for the deboner, then made short work of 5 goblin necks. I refilled the purple sack, stripped to my boxers, and washed my hands thoroughly. I fetched an outfit from the bedroom: lamb's wool trousers, an Egyptian cotton tee, alpaca socks, and snakeskin sneakers. I redonned the gloves and wound the free end of the bungee cord around my shoulder, dangling the sharpened pan over my chest. Though the cotton tee kept the iron off my skin, I was sure to be welted by end of day. I completed my ensemble with a zip-up cashmere hoodie. I stood in the doorway of the closet, taking in the home I'd made here, then pried up the board, dropped through the hole in the floor, and fell towards the center of the known realities. Down, down towards Goblin Town. But first was the closet on-ramp. The fogways are an eternal transit system with predetermined stops throughout the realities. Forested ravines, river mouths, temples, and tech hubs or whatnot. Engineering a custom ingress point into someone's closet or litter box, for example, requires puissance and sacrifice. This on-ramp was a cold and prickly tunnel of dense mist. Except it wasn't really mist, but a stream of solar particulates that, if I looked close, formed shades of their previous selves and looked back. I saw echoes of goblin children, puppies, a unicorn in his prime, and a beautiful butterfly woman. Madame Hex had pulled all the stops in her pursuit of my gold. Emerging on the shoulder of the fogway, I gazed Wittershenwards, considering, I admit, going off in the opposite direction of the goblin market, Madame Hex and Benny, perhaps even towards unknown realities. Nah, I told myself, she'd find me. And I loved that damn cat. A clutch of lizardmen, homeward bound from a mining expedition in Pellucidar, emerged from the fog. I stretched my thumb. They slowed their loaded wagon, extended a pole, and hauled me aboard. I told them my destination, Goblin Market. The chief wagoneer bobbed his head knowingly. Who isn't going to Goblin Market? And whipped his Gnorf to speed. I eyed their load of silver ore, but left off when the chief noted my interest. We passed quietly through the fogs, a featureless landscape punctuated by occasional leaning obelisks, profane colossi, or techno-horror constructions. In no time, or ages, we were slowing as a towering archway loomed ahead. The lizards bobbed their farewells, then tossed me from the wagon. The pillars of the arch were as graffitied as ever, just with new tags. I scratched at my itching chest and followed a sandy path through the arch. On the other side, the fog dropped to swirl about my ankles. The swollen blood moon hung low enough to almost touch. Squinting, I could make out the gargantuan structures upon its scarlet surface. Vendors cried raucously in the distance. "Apples and quinces! Come by! Come by! Maimers, phasers, and make 'em deaders! Manticore heads and phoenix feathers, all ripe together in summer weather! Automatons, golems, and laser batons, come by! Come by!" A deep voice growled, much closer than the vendors. "This road has a toll." "Aye, and I'm in a hurry," I replied, stepping into the shadow of the gigantic winged lioness sprawled across the sandy path. "A cat's in trouble. Any chance you've seen it? A spotted Bengal?" I did see a cat of that description. The wide human face frowned. It was being transported by a skunk ape. "Was he okay?" "Neither looked particularly happy about the arrangement," the gated sphinx said, but he appeared in good health otherwise. I moved to pass the sphinx. It turned its head, eyes glowing. Rules are rules." I suppose they are. I sighed. Oil, fresh squeezed lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, garlic, Worcestershire and Tabasco, anchovies, a coddled egg, salt and pepper to taste. Mmm. The Sphinx furrowed its brow. What is Caesar dressing? Puts the store-bought slop to shame, I confirmed. Delicious. The Sphinx's purrs rumbled in my chest as I rounded her flank. Better than the shamrock smoothie you offered last time. Good luck finding your cat. Ahead of me lay the commercial center of the known realities, a tangled maze of stalls lit by paper lanterns, gas lamps, and garish electric string lights. Vendors and buyers from across the fogs haggled for spells, tech, exotic foods, and anything else you could imagine. The screams of animals, sex workers, and hawkers filled the air, and the smells were an olfactory overload of disgust and delight. There were goblins everywhere, and all manner of other beings crowded the narrow pathways. I kept my sack close, checked that the bungee cord held the sharpened pan fast, and strode with purpose, ignoring the lurid calls of the vendors. Market cats rubbed against my ankles and trailed my steps, as if they knew my mission. Someone threw a rotten plum at me. An ancient owl-headed cobbler hailed me as I passed his stand. Those won't last the night here. He indicated my snakeskin sneakers. Too delicate. He blinked rheumy eyes. You look like someone who could use some dino hide stompers. Not tonight, old-timer, I replied. The cobbler hooted his disappointment and resumed mending a pair of hobnailed boots. I continued toward a line of low buildings that edged the market square. Passing between a cryptid abattoir and a ghost brothel, I entered Spill Blood Row. It was fairly empty at this hour. Song, laughter, and the occasional scream sounded through greasy windows as I trod deeper. The whine of an old ginger Tom alerted me to danger. A figure lunged from an alley, long arms akimbo. "Gimmer a cuss," it growl-slurred. I slung my pan. Lickety-splat, a head toppled to the ground. The bungee cord recoiled, returning the pan to my tingling hand before the body hit the dirt. The scarlet moonlight revealed the corpse as a mangy chupacabra in a clown costume, makeup smeared across its snout. I scanned the street and shadows for other attackers or witnesses, and saw none. I did notice a crude sign affixed to a leaning post, reading Sly Fay Alley. Coincidence? Sorry, bud, I offered to the corpse as I searched his pockets, but you oughtn't to be jumping out at folks like that. All he was carrying was a tin of grease paint. Holding my pan at the ready, I entered the alley. The cats opted to stay behind. I navigated the shadowed alley, past drunken revelers and unconscious, or possibly dead, bodies. No foes emerged to molest me, though a horny warlock and a spider-woman did offer. Sorry, no silk bondage for me tonight. I approached an arched doorway decorated with a dead, hanging cocker spaniel puppy. A mothman with glowing eyes towered before the door. I tucked the pan back under my hoodie, zipped it up, and approached. The mothman gave me a glowering once-over, then nodded and stepped aside. 3 steps from the door to conference room 2, a purple, ham-sized fist grips my sleeve, sloshing more Valkyrie's fire onto the floor. Chew Lane's bones. Earth, eh? The purple peril's eyes are bloodshot and bleary. Little white worms writhe inside the pits festooning his face. Recognize the clothes. He pulls me closer. A thick reek of ale and black lotus almost knocks me over. Does glory last there? Yeah, sure, I say, but it's not cheap. He yanks me onto the seat beside him. I land hard, splashing even more of the precious drink onto his arm. Oh, crap. Sorry, Gulatong. His eyes narrow. You know me? Fool's gold. The victories of the Violet Violator are known across the realities, I explain. Even on Earth, you say? Gulatong releases my arm. Maybe it's time I visited. He gulps from his tankard, his head lolling. Is there meaning? Okay. He's in such a state he wouldn't recognize his own mother, and I was half as tall and sporting that awful beard when we did business together. I breathe a little easier and note the bulging leather pouch belted to his waist. My fingers start to itch. Oh, it's lovely. Ripe for, conquest. Gulatong slump over the table. I sip my diminishing drink. I heard you finally vanquished Aldo Lutz. Lutz. A living statue now. Realm is mine. Gulatong leans further over the table. A worm falls from his face and crumbles to dust upon the tabletop. Even ultimate victory fades to nothing. The purple peril starts to snore. I start to reach under the table towards that pouch of his. My fingertips graze leather. I pull my hand back. Not today, while Benny's in danger. Leaving Gulatong to his sour dreams, I slip from my seat, open the drawer, and step into a hot, stuffy room. Took you long enough, squeaks a voice I know too well. Madame Hex is seated at a round table, wearing a voluminous dress of shimmering pink taffeta despite the heat. Her platinum blonde hair is up in a beehive, a few stray strands sticking to her sweaty cheeks. The sparkly rainbow aura emanating from her willowy frame competes with the glow of the bola de fuego hovering behind her. The giant sentient fireball has been bound to her for years. The aforementioned skunk ape leans against the wall, as far from the bola as it can get, a scowl creasing its hairy face. Luckily, the bola burns off the worst of its stench. There's no sign of Benny. Madam Hex. Kevin. She smiles, showing perfect white teeth, then points an ivory arm at the chair opposite her. Have a seat. The chair slides away from the table. I smile, sit, place my drink on the table, then the purple sack, and rest a hand atop it. Where's my cat? Oh, he's around. Hex's sky-blue eyes fix on the bulging sack. You're finally ready to pay? As soon as you give me the cat. I pat the sack. I just couldn't bear to be parted from my precious gold before. A deal's a deal. Hex stares at the sack. And I kept my part of the bargain. The bola burns a little brighter at that. That you did, I nod. I've appreciated this body you gave me. I trust it has helped you evade most of your creditors. Hex finally looks up, her eyes cold as a shark's. The skunk ape farts. Oh, you wretched beast. She squeaks like an angry mouse. Stand beside the bola if you're going to do that. The cat, Hex. Oh, fine. She snaps her fingers. A cat carrier appears on the floor by the wall. Benny is inside, cleaning himself. Give it to him. The skunk ape lifts the carrier and places it at my feet. I rub my fingers in front of the barred entrance. Are you okay, Benny? He ignores me. Now, Hex says, the gold. Here it is. I sip Valkyrie's fire and push the sack towards Hex. She seizes the drawstring. I scratch my chest as Hex undoes the knot and upends the sack over the table. 5 goblin heads tumble out. What? Hex's eyes bulge. I hurl the cast iron and spit a stream of liquor at the same time. The pan whistles straight for Hex's throat. The Valkyrie's fire hits the bola and ignites. I jerk my head, directing the flaming liquid towards Hex. The pan bounces off a magical barrier that flashes in and out of visibility. The enchanted Valkyrie flame makes it through, though. Unfortunately, the flame also catches the bungee, melting it instantly. The pan thuds to the table. I toss the rest of the liquor in my glass at her for good measure. Hex shrieks as her taffeta dress ignites, the sound shattering the glass in my hand. Benny yowls in alarm. The bola flares hotter, fueling the flames. Hex hurls herself to the floor and rolls. The skunk ape retreats from the chaos. The bola hovers to the common room entrance as an azure mist envelops Hex. The fire gutters out. She groans and stands, looking like a singed supermodel. Malfeasant, she croaks. Give me the gold, or I'll turn you into a leprechaun. You'll never get it, hag. Then die. Hex's aura darkens as she raises her arms and claws at the air. Black energy crackles between her hands. I grab a severed goblin head from the tabletop and lob it at her burnt face. Her magical barrier deflects it, but she blinks instinctively. I roll an instant before she unleashes a bolt of black force that blasts a hole in the wall. She had to lower her barrier to shoot that bolt, and I'm already behind her, delivering a swift kick to the back of her knee. She tumbles into the bola and shrieks as fire covers her again, her magical barrier blinking like a broken lamp. Hex stumbles away from the bola, hair and dress aflame. The skunk ape cowers, but I'm not afraid of fire. I seize the pan and leap on Hex's back. You've reached the end of the rainbow, witch. I hack at her statuesque body, my gloves protecting me from the worst of the flames. Her magical barrier shines weaker with each blow. The bola hovers uncertainly. It can't burn me without burning her. Hex's barrier blinks out. She shrieks bloody murder as my pan sinks into flesh. Her neck, her skull. She slumps to the floor, twitches once, and is still. Her aura fades. Dead, Hex's spells undo. Released from bondage, the bola disappears in a puff of smoke. The skunk ape lunges forward and swings a paw, but instead of slashing my torso, it gouges my scalp. The beast seems to grow before me, my eyes now level with its knees as magic surges through my veins. My cheeks itch as they sprout a rapidly growing beard. I hurl the pan at the skunk ape as it swipes at me again. The sharpened edge bites deep into the beast's throat. It falls back, gurgling blood. I flick off my snakeskin kicks and shimmy out of my too big trousers. The scorched cashmere hoodie fits like a robe now. Through the hole in the wall, I see chaos in the common room. Drunkards are stumbling for the exit. The death worm is wrapped around a clockwork cutthroat, squeezing it to bits. Maureen gapes from behind the bar, her jaw hanging in default slack mode, as the Mothman makes a half-hearted effort to restore order. Gulatong, covered in bits of blackened plaster, is leaning haphazardly against his table, a flush of confused rage darkening his pitted face. Then he sees me, bearded and small again, and flushes a shade darker. Time to go. I pop the cat carrier's door open. Benny rushes out. I jump atop his back, grab his collar with one hand, and prod his ribs with my heels. He yowls and runs like hell, dodging between Gulatong's legs and racing across the common room like furred lightning. You! Gulatong roars behind me. Thief! Benny leaps through the open door and looks down the alley, dashing past fleeing patrons. I nip a cloak from a staggering dwarf and toss the sodden garment around my shoulders with a shudder. Benny reaches the mouth of the alley and jumps over the corpse of a headless chupacabra. I tug his collar right, steering him toward the market. I pull him to a halt at the end of Spill Blood Row and dismount. Good boy. I pet his side. He looks at me appraisingly, like he's wondering if I'm something he can eat. I pull the bag of perfect cat treats from my hoodie pocket and give him some. He likes that. I reach into the pocket and finger the gold within. I'm getting low on coins. I sigh and lead my cat into the goblin market. 2 steps and something warm and fetid squishes underfoot. Farewell alpaca socks. I head for the stand of that old goblin cobbler. A pair of miniature dino hide stompers would be handy right now. Mayhap the cobbler would barter for the service of a temporary assistant with an eye for high fashion. Aye, and mayhap he's got a nip of gold as well. Hello, Jason. Welcome to Cosmic Goblins.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So I want to talk about the story, but before we get into that, I'd like to ask you a little bit about yourself as a writer. How'd you get started? How long have you been doing it? That kind of thing.
Well, I had fiddled around a little bit. Like I wrote some poetry and maybe, in early teenage years, I can remember like mapping out ideas for comic stories, but I was primarily just a reader. And then a turning point was in 2010, I found a wild cards book. Strange or serendipitous place. I found this book and it was actually the exact, like, it was another copy of a book I had borrowed from my uncle when I was 13 or 14, and then it eventually disappeared, was not appropriate for young people. But
Hmm.
I liked it then, thought it was weird, didn't fully get it. And then in a weird mini library on a university field course, I found the same book. And I was like, well, that's weird. So I took the book and I was absolutely blown away by it. It's about wild cards 7 or 8. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the series. It's
I'm not. I'm intrigued though.
Wild Cards is George R. R. Martin and a number of other writers before the Game of Thrones
Oh,
thing
okay.
in the 80s. They were all playing a superhero RPG together, and they got so into it that they eventually wondered if they could do something with it. And so
Hmm.
they created this shared world. First book out in 86, and it got a lot of attention. And there's about 30 books in the series now.
Wow.
And so it really blew me away. And that's what really got me thinking that I wanted to write. And so that would have been like summer of 2010.
Gotcha. And are you an RPG player at all?
A little bit. I did a bit when I was a kid, and I'm wanting to get back into it. It's just one of these questions of schedules and peoples. So in the past year, I've got a bunch of the new D&D source books. I also got Hero Quest, which is one I had when I was a kid. So I got the new
Nice.
Hero Quest. Also got the Clash for Eternia Masters of the Universe game. And so I've been mapping my return and ultimately wanting to DM, and so sort of refreshing myself on that stuff and wanting to do more of it again.
Yeah, for sure. And this story, it kind of screams D&D to me. Like it would be a great setting to do a campaign. The Fogway and all the little details that you have added throughout. I think you could probably homebrew with that setting if you could find the people, of course. That's the tough part.
Yeah, it's about finding people who want to do it, and not just get really drunk. Um,
Yeah,
and I've absolutely thought about adapting some of those elements into like a homebrew campaign.
gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome. And yeah, I love how colorful the story is. You're very maximalistic as a writer when it comes to the details and of all the little corners of the Fogway and the universe. I'm curious, was there a method to the madness as far as world building, or did you kind of take a stream of consciousness approach when you were writing?
It went in stages. That story, Fool's Gold, when it originally started, it started with the goblin attack. And so
Mhm.
and at that point, like the story was maybe half as long. It mainly was about the attack in the apartment, which is the apartment that I'm in right now. Um, and it ended with the character who became Kevin deciding he was gonna leave and follow the fogways to get back at Madam Hex. And then it grew out from there, and the different parts of it came together bit by bit over a number of years. I'm sort of someone I write and I leave something and I come back and I fiddle around and stuff. So it grew over a couple years, and that's where sort of the stuff with there I'd mentioned the fog, I think, but then it was like, okay, the fog ways, and then imagining this space kind of where worlds or realities intersect. So it did kind of come in phases in that way. And then I did want to fill it out with a lot of stuff, and with the idea that some of those minor characters who appear in Fool's Gold and Kevin's story, that they may be main characters in other stories is part of the thought that as I think about what else I could do with that world.
Yeah, yeah, you've got a kind of a multiverse going on there where I feel like there's probably 20 different spots throughout the story where there's like a little paragraph or a little sentence there where it's like, oh, this could be its whole other thing.
I mean, I did that, and I knew I was doing it, and then wondered how difficult it might be to sell the story because of it. Um, as a writer, like one of the things I try to work on, I'm aware I do sometimes try to pack a lot in there, where
Hmm.
that like, and sometimes I do wrestle with that, like sort of looking at scope, then the form of a short story. And so sometimes I feel there can be a conflict there, or it has to be polished the right way, or you have to find the right market. Because it was, I'd certainly had some rejections, and then got really good feedback from Charles that um, he really liked it, and it was advancing to the final round, and then ultimately it was selected. So I was very, very happy about that.
Yeah, and so much of the fantasy genre is reliant on these big, epic, sprawling tomes where you can kind of take your time to world build. But I really like the conciseness of the short story and still like finding ways to fill it out and make it feel like a really rich world. And yeah, I kind of think that like the sword and sorcery genre, fantasy short fiction, I think there's maybe a growing market for that. I mean, I'm hoping so. But yeah, it seems like it's been so reliant on these sprawling tales for so long. I'm glad to see there's a bit of a comeback in that form.
I'm wondering about this as well, and, like, some of my reading, for this winter, this year, like, some of the year's best sci-fi fantasy, and I'm curious to see what could be happening there in more in the fantasy realms, because I haven't read I feel like I don't encounter as much
Mhm.
short fantasy that
Yeah.
deals with sort of the sword and sorcery elements, so I'm curious what could be happening in these and to see how people are approaching it, you know? So I grew up on that stuff. I mean, and for me, it started with, I found Conan and Tarzan novels in my grandpa's basement around
Hmm.
grade 5. And that changed everything because I found these worlds I could go into. And then I read voraciously. And then all of a sudden, instead of sort of struggling in school, I was years ahead in reading. And then I found, Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms. And then later was, I could get through reading The Lord of the Rings. And so that stuff was all very foundational. I've also tired of some of those standard elements. So, like, in
Sure.
this case, the story does have, some of those different standard creatures, but
Hmm.
maybe looked at it a little bit differently. Whereas I'm also like, I'm not sure if you've ever read China Medieval, like his Perdido Street Station, and like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Vast Lag trilogy, I absolutely love. And that has some because that's got sort of the weird aspects. So then you do have fantasy and sci-fi and horror and steampunk all together.
Yeah, I have not read his stuff, but it's been on my list forever, but I keep hearing that he's sort of like the one of the poster kids of the new weird. And yeah, I really appreciate I mean, I love the old tropes as well. You know, I'm a fan of D&D and I'm a fan of Tolkien and all that too, but mixing it up and doing something new is always interesting as well.
Well, and with that, one of the things I thought we might talk about today too is that by mixing it up, part of what I did was go to some of the older sources. So you may have noticed that the goblins in the story, the way they're described, they don't look like goblins or orcs that you're going to encounter in
Hmm.
a Tolkien story or a Dragonlance or Forgotten Realms story. And that's something I did really deliberately because there's a history that can be traced of how these different types of fantastical creatures are depicted. And so I drew inspiration for the goblins in the story um, from like Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market. And so the Goblin Market setting is inspired by her poem from about the 1860s,
Oh, wow,
which has
nice.
the goblins are these creatures more like they're not homogenous. They don't all look the same. They're different hybrids of animal and human. Similarly, George MacDonald's Princess and the Goblin, which inspired Tolkien, the goblins are all different from each other. So there's works like that, and of course, like Labyrinth, the classic movie, the goblins are all kind of uniquely differently formed,
Hmm.
and that really speaks to me. And I've got an essay I've got seeds planted for, like the portrait of the goblin, looking at like how did that happen? How did it go from these creatures who all look different to then, with the emergence of fantasy fiction coming out in this form, saying in Tolkien and afterwards, where they all become much more similar, maybe green or gray skinned, all male, all very similar traits, and there is a really interesting history there that ties to the history of adventure fiction that
Hmm.
those traits were really common in adventure fiction of the late 1800s and early 1900s, where those traits were given to non-European people. Like Africans, indigenous North Americans were treated as sort of these less than human savage creatures that were disposable, that lacked full human motive, and that around the time that all the blank spots on the map of our world were filled in and the mystery of those areas seem to be receding is when you have sci-fi and then fantasy taking off and emerging, and some of those same racial traits then being applied to fantastical creatures. And so that's part of what I'm trying to look at there is, I don't know if I'd say a redemption of the goblin, but I think the goblin deserves a closer look.
Yeah, yeah, and I honestly feel like it's become even more homogenized in the last few decades, especially with, I mean, I guess with D&D and similar games, it's sort of cemented that image, but also with like Magic the Gathering, goblins are very common in that as well. But yeah, I do wonder. It seems like so much of that stems from Tolkien, and I did read the Lord of the Rings trilogy about a year and a half ago, and I'm trying to remember. It feels like he kept the goblins very much at arm's length. Like maybe he described one or two of them, but I don't know that he ever describe them as being homogenous or if we collectively just sort of decided that they were. Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting essay. I'd be curious to read it.
Yeah, maybe this next year I'll work on that. And I think you're right about Tolkien there. I think he describes them in a bit more detail with a bit more personality, perhaps in The Hobbit when
Yeah,
they
yeah.
encounter the Goblin King and stuff. Um, but yeah, it is, it's interesting to see how much was that him, and then, or is it how people then imagined or adapted his work and
Mm.
took for inspiration in their own.
So, one thing I do want to ask about is Benny. I'm curious. Are you a cat person? Do you have a cat?
I don't have a cat. I do consider myself more of a cat person than say a dog person, and I've had cats. I grew up with cats. Um, Currently, my roommate has a dog, Gomez, who is a very good, very energetic boy. And we also share a bearded dragon named Xena, who's here in the room with me. I've got her in the jade plant in the window for some natural sunlight.
Named after the warrior princess? Is it that
She
Xena?
kind of is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we named her after that. And so I would like to have cats again, and that may happen at some time in the future. Because I do miss them. I love kitties.
Mhm. Well, when you eventually do, I hope that you name them Benny in honor of the story.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
So, I know you said you're working on that essay. Do you have any fiction that you've been working on recently, or that you've been kind of sitting on and editing and submitting or anything?
Yeah. I've always got numerous things on the go, and as I say before, my process, as I refine it, I often work on something and then leave it. So there was a story I finished um, a month or a bit ago that I haven't looked at since, that I'm going to give some time, because that's another story where there's a lot in there. When it's up to about 10,000 words, which raises the question: does it need to become a novella?
Mm,
So I'm letting that one sit. I'm in the process of adapting about a 10,000 word superhero themed story into a novella, and I've been taking chapters of that to my writers group, the Toronto Sci-Fi Fantasy Writers. It's a really great group. We meet weekly.
oh, awesome.
Um, I've got a couple horror stories that I'm going through the submission process through, so finding different markets and sending to them, or marking in my calendar when those different markets are opening. I started a new one just yesterday or 2 days ago, thinking about Sandbanks Beach. I've been going to my whole life. It's a really cool beach in Ontario with big sand dunes and big crashing waves, and I knew there was a horror story in there somewhere, and then it came to me in bed the other night. So there's tons of that. I'm also a musician, so I've been playing in punk bands for about 25
Nice.
years.
What do you play?
I play bass and sing
Nice.
and do a lot of writing. So my main band, Knife Hammer, we have a full length album coming out in a couple months and some music videos. And with that, there is a comic book coming with the album that I saw the first 5 sample pages the artist sent in, and it's looking great. So I'm really excited about that. So I've been a big comic fan for
Very
my whole
cool.
life.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on, and I'm looking at screenwriting as well. So I did a horror short screenwriting course in November and wrote a short for that. And my instructor and other friends in the film industry are encouraging me to pursue developing it. So I'm looking at the granting process and putting together a team for that. So there's a lot on the go.
Yeah, yeah. All kinds of disciplines, all kinds of mediums. That's fun.
Yeah, I mean, art and creativity is what gives purpose and meaning to my life. I live a very privileged life. I've got a great affordable place here in Toronto. I've got great community, very rich in spirit, and it's great to be able to pursue these types of things and creative expression and to find fulfillment through them.
Awesome. Well, we really enjoyed the story. It's going to be a really fun episode. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
It's been a pleasure. I'm very happy and I'm glad you enjoyed the story, and I hope all the listeners do too.
I'm sure they will. Jason Plouffe lives in Toronto, Canada. His work has also appeared in Drabbledark, an anthology of dark microfiction. Thanks again for joining us on Cosmic Goblins. Once again, today's story, among many others, can be found in issue 1 of Goblins and Galaxies magazine. This has been a Randolph Literary Press production. Music composed by Tyler McLemore. I'm your host, Alex Wolfgang. See you next time.